Welcome, friends. Tonight we step quietly into the stone corridors of a medieval castle. Not the shining halls of legend, but the drafty chambers where noblewomen lived out their days. Forget the ballads of romance and glittering feasts. Behind the gowns of fur and silk lay a life of cold breath in the morning air, heavy gowns worn more for warmth than beauty, and nights that stretched endlessly beneath flickering candlelight. These women were born to privilege, yes, but privilege could not keep away the frost that crept through every shutter, or the loneliness that echoed in vast, empty halls. Together, we'll wander through chambers that smell of smoke and damp straw, sit beside the narrow fires that never quite reached the corners, and listen to the whispers of servants and the soft strains of a minstrel's lute. It is a world both beautiful and bleak, stitched with duty, endurance, and quiet strength.
Waking in the cold hall. The first sensation is not of light, but of its absence. The darkness in the chamber is a deep, heavy, and resonant blackness. But the second sensation is the one that truly defines the world, the cold. It is not the sharp, clean cold of an open window, but a deep, ancient, and patient cold. A cold that lives in the very bones of the stone walls that surround you. You are waking in a chamber high in a castle keep, somewhere in the heart of medieval Europe. You're a lady of noble birth. You stir not because of the sun, which is still a distant promise, but because of a deep internal rhythm, or perhaps the distant, muffled sound of the castle beginning to stir. The clang of a pot in the kitchens below, the call of a guard on the battlements. You were buried under a mountain of blankets. There is a coarse linen sheet against your skin, and then layer upon layer of heavy, dense wool blankets, and, as a person of your status, a thick, luxurious fur pelt on top. The weight is immense, a comforting, crushing pressure that is the only real barrier between your body and the room's chilling air. You open your eyes, and your own breath is a faint white cloud in the darkness, a small, fleeting ghost. The air you breathe is damp and smells of cold stone, of old wool, and of the faint, lingering scent of last night's beeswax candle. The walls of your chamber are immense, several feet thick, built not for comfort, but for defense. These great stones are like a battery for the cold. All through the long winter night, they have been drinking the frost from the air, and now they breathe it back into the room. If you were to touch the stone wall, it would feel slick and damp with a thin film of condensation, a testament to the constant battle between the small, fugitive warmth of your body and the immense thermal mass of the castle. Your bed is a fortress within this fortress, a great four-poster bed carved from heavy oak. Its primary function is not comfort, but defense against the cold. Heavy curtains of velvet or thick wool hang from all four sides. They are drawn shut at night, creating a small fabric room, a tent of relative warmth within the vast cold chamber. But even these curtains feel cold and heavy with damp in the morning air. The only window is a narrow arrow slit, a deep-set opening in the stone. It is not glazed with glass, a rare and incredible luxury. It is covered by a heavy wooden shutter, now tightly barred, or perhaps a piece of stretched and oiled parchment, which lets in a dim, milky light, but offers no view. The floor is of stone flags or thick, wide wooden planks. There are no carpets as we know them. The floor is strewn with a layer of dried rushes or straw, which offers a meager layer of insulation and helps to absorb some of the dampness. In the summer, sweet herbs are mixed in. In the winter, it is often just damp and smells of crushed herbs and dust. When you finally summon the will to leave the sanctuary of your bed, the act is a shock to the system. You swing your legs out from under the furs, and the cold air bites at your skin. Your bare feet
touch the cold rushes, and the chill shoots up through your body. A serving girl enters, her footsteps echoing in the quiet. She carries a single candle, its tiny, flickering flame a fragile, precious thing in the vast, cold darkness. It does not warm the room, but it gives it a shape, casting long, dancing shadows that make the chamber seem even larger, even colder than before. The day has begun, not with the sun, but with the lighting of a single flame against the great, patient cold of the stone. In the cold chamber of a medieval morning, the process of dressing for a noblewoman is a slow, elaborate, and deeply strategic ritual. It is not merely about putting on a beautiful gown. It is about constructing a personal, portable shelter, a multi-layered defense of fabric that is both a declaration of her status and her primary weapon in the unending war against the castle's chill. The process begins with the assistance of her ladies-in-waiting or serving maids. She stands, shivering in the cold air, wearing only her simple, long linen shift, the garment she has slept in. This is the foundation, the layer closest to the skin, designed to absorb moisture and to provide a smooth barrier between her body and the coarse wool to come. The first true layer of warmth is a pair of long woolen stockings, which are pulled up to her knees or thighs and held in place with garters of leather or embroidered cloth. Next comes the undertunic or kirtle. This is a long, simple but well-fitted dress of fine, soft wool. It has long, tight sleeves. This garment is the core of her insulation, a full body layer of wool that begins to trap her own body heat. But a single layer of wool is not nearly enough to combat the deep, penetrating cold of the stone halls. Over the first kirtle, she will wear another, and sometimes even a third. Each layer is a different color, a different weight of fabric. The principle is simple and effective. Multiple, relatively thin layers are far warmer than a single thick one, as each layer traps a new pocket of insulating air. After the layers of wool comes the gown itself, the cotardie or the houppelande, depending on the specific period and fashion. This is the garment of display. It is made of the most luxurious fabrics her family can afford. It might be a heavy, lustrous velvet, or a rich patterned brocade, or a wool so fine it feels like silk. The colors are deep and vibrant. A rich crimson, a deep forest green, a royal blue. These dyes are incredibly expensive, a clear and visible statement of her family's wealth and power. But even this magnificent outer garment is designed with the cold in mind. It is often lined with another material, and for the winter, that lining is fur. Fur is the ultimate luxury, a symbol of high status and a source of unparalleled warmth. The inside of her gown, the cuffs of her long, trailing sleeves, the collar of her dress, all might be lined with the soft, dense fur of squirrel, of rabbit, or for the very highest nobility, the pure white, black-tipped fur of the ermine. To wear a fur-lined gown is to be wrapped in a soft, silent, and incredibly effective shield of warmth. The process is one of slow, careful assembly. The maids pull the laces of the kirtles tight, ensuring a snug fit that allows for no drafts. They arrange the heavy folds of the outer gown. They fasten the ornate, jeweled belt around her waist. She is now dressed. She is encased in an architecture of fabric, a core of linen, followed by multiple layers of wool, and finished with a magnificent fur-lined shell of velvet or brocade. The total weight of her clothing is considerable, and her movement is restricted, graceful, but deliberate. She is a walking tapestry, a beautiful and complex creation. But beneath the silk and the jewels, beneath the performance of her high status, is a simple, practical reality. Every layer, every stitch, every piece of fur is a part of a desperate and often beautiful strategy to stay warm in a world that is, for many months of the year, profoundly and unyieldingly cold. Fires that never reached the corners. In the great cavernous spaces of a medieval castle or manor house, the fireplace is the sun. It is the single radiant heart of the room, a point of light and life in a world of stone and shadow. A great roaring fire is a symbol of wealth, of power, and of hospitality. But the reality of medieval heating is that this magnificent fire was a deeply inefficient and often frustratingly localized source of warmth. Let us stand in the great hall of the castle. At one end of the vast room, a fireplace is built into the stone wall. It is a colossal structure, a maw of stone large enough for a person to stand inside. A huge fire is burning within it, logs as thick as a man's thigh blazing away, their flames leaping and dancing, casting a warm orange glow that illuminates the high timbered ceiling and the tapestries on the walls. The sound of the fire is a deep, satisfying roar, a sound of pure power and comfort. The heat it produces is intense. If you stand directly in front of it, your face feels scorched, your clothes feel hot to the touch. This small circle of space, directly before the hearth, is the most prized territory in the entire castle. It is here that the lord and his lady will sit. It is here that guests of honor will be placed. But take just 10 or 15 steps back from the fire, and the sensation of warmth vanishes almost completely. The great hall is a place of dramatic temperature gradients. The radiant heat of the fire travels in a straight line, and it does not warm the air of the room itself. The vast, uninsulated space, with its high ceiling and its cold. The medieval fireplace, for all its grandeur, is a terribly inefficient design. It has no damper to control the airflow. A huge volume of air from the room is sucked into the fire and then straight up the wide open chimney. This creates a powerful draft, a constant gentle wind that pulls cold air from every other part of the hall towards the fire. So while the front of your body, facing the fire, might be roasting, your back, facing the room, is being chilled by a steady cold draft. And then there is the smoke. While the chimney is a great improvement over the simple smoke hole of a peasant's hut, it is often poorly designed. A shift in the wind outside can cause a downdraft, sending great billowing clouds of thick, acrid smoke pouring back into the hall. The air is often hazy, the great roof beams blackened with a permanent layer of soot. In the lady's private chamber, her solar, the fireplace is more modest, but the principle is the same. The warmth is a localized blessing. She might have a small portable brazier of hot coals that she can place at her feet while she does her embroidery, a personal, movable source of heat. Her bed, as we have seen, is enclosed with heavy curtains, creating a small fabric room within the larger, colder room. This box bed is designed to trap the body heat of the sleepers, creating a small, warm microclimate for the night. So the experience of a medieval winter indoors is not one of uniform central heating. It is a constant migration, a strategic movement from one small island of warmth to another. It is a life lived in the glow of the hearth, but always with a keen awareness of the great, cold, drafty ocean of air that lies just beyond the firelight. The roaring fire is a beautiful, powerful, and deeply comforting thing, but its reach is short, and its victory over the cold is never complete. The corners of the room and of life remain stubbornly, unreachably cold. Glassless windows and shutters of wood. The walls of a medieval castle are a formidable defense against an invading army, but they are a surprisingly porous and ineffective barrier against the silent, persistent invasion of the winter wind. The weak points in this stone fortress are the windows. In a world where glass is an almost unimaginable luxury, the windows of a castle are a constant source of drafts, a series of open wounds in the skin of the building. Let us stand in the solar of our noblewoman, her private sitting room. The room has a large window, a sign of its high status. But this window is not a single clear pane of glass. It is a lattice, a framework of either wood or stone, divided into many small openings. In the summer, these openings are left open to the air, but in the winter, they must be sealed. Some of the openings might be filled with small, translucent panes of material, not glass, but thinly sliced pieces of horn, which have been scraped and polished until they are semi-transparent. Or they might be filled with a piece of stretched and oiled linen or parchment. These materials let in a dim, milky, and distorted light, but they offer no view of the outside world. The majority of the window opening, however, is simply covered by heavy, solid wooden shutters. These are installed on the inside of the window, and they are closed and barred at night, and for much of the day in the winter. But these shutters, no matter how well made, are never a perfect seal. The wood warps in the damp air. The iron hinges are crude. There are always small gaps.
And the wind finds these cracks. It is a relentless and cunning intruder. It whistles through the small openings with a high, mournful, and constant sound. You can hear the winter speaking through the walls. This creates a stream of icy air that flows into the room, a permanent and unavoidable draft. The heavy curtains and tapestries that hang in the room are a direct response to this. A great thick curtain of wool or velvet is drawn across the window, but even it trembles and billows with the force of the draft behind it. The noblewoman learns to read the movement of the curtains as a measure of the wind's strength. Sometimes, during a blizzard, the wind will drive fine, powdery snow through these cracks. A small, delicate drift of snow might form on the wide stone windowsill, or even on the rushes of the floor below. The outside world is literally seeping into the inside. The arrow slits, the narrow vertical windows designed for defense, are even worse. They are architectural drafts, designed tunnels that channel the wind directly into the corridors and chambers. To walk past an arrow slit on a winter's day is to feel a sudden, sharp, and shockingly cold blast of air. And so the life of the noblewoman is a life lived in a state of constant strategic avoidance of these cold zones. She learns where the drafts are. She positions her chair for her needlework carefully, out of the direct line of a leaky window. She knows that to sit in certain parts of the room is to invite a deep, bone-aching chill. The window, which we think of as a source of light and a connection to the world, is, in the medieval winter, a source of darkness, and a constant, chilling reminder of the hostile environment that lies just beyond the stone. It is a compromise, a necessary weakness in the fortress, and a battle that is fought and lost every single day.
The castle's smell. We often imagine the past through our eyes and our ears, but to truly understand the world of a medieval castle in winter, we must engage a different, more primal sense. We must imagine what it smelled like. The air within those cold stone walls was not neutral. It was a thick, complex, and deeply layered soup of odors. a powerful and constant presence that told the story of the life, the labor, and the decay of the castle community. The most dominant and pervasive scent, the baseline note of the entire castle, is wood smoke. From the great roaring fire in the hall to the smaller fires in the kitchens and in the private chambers, a constant stream of smoke is produced. The chimneys are often inefficient, and a significant portion of that smoke leaks back into the rooms, creating a permanent, hazy atmosphere. It is a slightly acrid, yet not entirely unpleasant smell. It is the smell of warmth, of safety, of the taming of the wild wood. It clings to the tapestries, to the clothes, and to the very skin of the people who live here. Woven into the smoke is the smell of the rushes on the floor. In the summer, these are fresh and sweet-smelling, but in the winter, the old rushes are left down for months. They absorb the spilled ale and wine from the feasts, the grease and the discarded bones tossed to the dogs. They become a damp, musty, and slowly decaying carpet. The smell is one of stale herbs, of sour drink, and of a deep, earthy decomposition. Then there is the smell of the people themselves. In a world of infrequent bathing, of heavy layered wool and fur clothing that is rarely washed, the scent of unwashed humanity is a constant. But it is not the sharp, offensive odor we might imagine. It is a familiar animal scent, the smell of a shared communal life. This is tempered, for the nobility, with the use of perfumes. A noblewoman might have a small sachet of dried lavender or rose petals tucked into her gown, or a pomander of spices carried in her hand, creating a small personal cloud of a more pleasant fragrance. The smell of food is another powerful layer. From the great kitchens comes the rich, savory smell of roasting meat, the sharp scent of onions and garlic, and the sweet, complex aroma of imported spices. But there is also the smell of the everyday food, the smell of the great cauldron of pottage that is always simmering, a smell of boiled cabbage, of turnips, and of barley. And then there is the smell of the light itself. The candles are made of tallow, rendered animal fat. When they burn, they give off a greasy, slightly foul-smelling smoke. Only in the chapel or on the high table are the clean, sweet-smelling beeswax candles used. The air is often thick with the smell of this burning fat. The castle is not a sterile place. It is a working fortress, a home to hundreds of people and to animals. The stables are often within the castle walls, and the raw, pungent smell of horse and of manure is a part of the castle's bouquet. The hunting dogs, their fur damp and smelly, sleep on the rushes of the great hall. All of these smells, the wood smoke, the damp rushes, the tallow, the cooking, the people, the animals, they are not separate. They are blended together by the cold, damp air into a single, unique, and unforgettable perfume. It is the smell of stone living. It is a smell that is earthy, it is smoky, it is organic, and it is profoundly human. It is the very breath of the medieval world. The morning mass. For the medieval noblewoman, the day does not truly begin with the breaking of her fast or the business of the household. It begins with a duty to God. The morning mass is the first and most important ritual of the day, a solemn and obligatory act that sets the spiritual tone for all that is to follow. And in the winter, it is an act of profound and often chilling devotion. After her lengthy process of dressing, Our Lady makes her way from her private chamber to the castle's chapel. She walks through the cold, dark, and silent stone corridors. Her footsteps, and those of her ladies-in-waiting who follow her, are the only sound. The chapel is often one of the coldest places in the entire castle. It is a tall, vaulted space, built of stone and often with larger windows than the domestic chambers, windows that might even contain some precious colored glass. But this glass is thin and uninsulated. The chapel is a beautiful, holy, and incredibly cold stone box. She enters the space. The air is frigid, colder even than her own chamber. Her breath is a thick white cloud in the gloom. The only light and warmth come from the dozens of beeswax candles that burn on the altar, their clean, sweet scent a stark contrast to the tallow of the rest of the castle. She kneels. There are no pews. She kneels on the hard, icy stone floor, or perhaps on a small, embroidered cushion that a servant has placed for her. Her knees ache with the cold that seeps up from the stone.
The priest, the castle's chaplain, begins the service. He is dressed in his fine, embroidered vestments, layer upon layer of silk and linen that offer their own defense against the cold. He begins to chant the Mass in Latin. The words are ancient, they are holy, and for the lady, they are largely incomprehensible. She knows the rhythm of the Mass, the moments to kneel, to stand, to make the sign of the cross. She follows along with the familiar sounds, but the meaning of the words is a deep and profound mystery. Her own prayer is a more personal and silent affair. She may have a small, beautifully illuminated book of hours, a personal prayer book. She follows the prayers for the day, her gloved finger tracing the lines of the elegant script. Her lips move, whispering the familiar words of the Pater Noster and the Ave Maria. Her thoughts might wander. The cold is a constant, distracting presence. She thinks of the tasks of the day ahead, of a letter she must write, of a sick child in the nursery. But she brings her mind back to the ritual, to the presence of God in this cold, sacred space. This is her duty. As the lady of the manor, her piety is a model for the entire household. Her presence at the morning Mass is a non-negotiable part of her role. It is an affirmation of her family's faith and their place in a divinely ordered universe. The ceremony is a feast for the senses, a stark contrast to the bleakness of the winter world outside. The flickering light of the candles, the deep, resonant chant of the priest's voice, the sweet, heavy smell of the incense, the flash of the gold and silver of the chalice on the altar. It is a moment of profound and carefully constructed beauty. But it is a cold beauty, a beauty that is observed through a constant, shivering awareness of the body's discomfort. The morning Mass is a perfect metaphor for the noblewoman's life, a life of immense privilege and of deep physical hardship, a life of outward beauty and of a quiet, internal endurance. Her prayers rise, like her own breath, as a small, white cloud into the cold, still air of the chapel.
The servants who dress her, the rustle of heavy fabric, a soft, respectful murmur. The image of the medieval noblewoman in her magnificent, multi-layered gown is one of effortless grace and elegance. But this elegance is an illusion, a carefully constructed performance. Behind the scenes, the creation of this image is the work of a team of other women, the ladies-in-waiting and the serving maids. For the noblewoman, the simple, personal act of getting dressed is a public and often passive experience, a daily ritual that underscores both her power and her powerlessness. The process begins in her cold bedchamber. After she has risen, her maids enter. They are young women, often the daughters of lesser nobles or of the castle's senior retainers. Their position in her household is a form of apprenticeship, a place to learn the manners and the skills of a high-born lady. The first task is the fire. A maid will kneel at the cold hearth and, with a skill born of long practice, she will coax a fire to life, its small, growing warmth a welcome if inadequate presence in the room. Then the dressing begins. The lady stands, often on a small wooden platform to make her more accessible, wearing only her simple linen shift. The maids move around her with a quiet, practiced efficiency. They are the architects of her appearance. They bring the layers of her clothing, which have been stored in great carved wooden chests. First, the long woolen stockings, held up with garters. Then the first undertunic, or kirtle. The lady holds her arms out, and the garment is slipped over her head. The maids then pull the long, tight laces at the back or the sides, cinching the garment to her body. This process is a collaboration, a dance of instruction and action.
Next comes the outer gown, the great, heavy, fur-lined garment. This is a two-person job. Its weight and bulk too much for one person to handle. They lift it, and she steps into it, her arms finding their way into the long, elaborate sleeves. And then there is the hair. Her hair is her crowning glory, and its arrangement is a complex and time-consuming art form. She sits before a small, polished metal mirror, which gives a dim and distorted reflection. A maid stands behind her with a comb of ivory or bone. For an hour or more, the maid will brush, braid, and coil the lady's long hair, creating the intricate and fashionable styles of the day. The final creation might be held in place with a net of silk or gold thread, and a fine linen veil will be pinned over it. Throughout this process, the lady is largely passive. She stands, she sits, she turns as she's instructed. She is the doll, and her maids are the dressers. She has immense authority over these women. A sharp word from her can have them dismissed. She is their mistress. But in this intimate daily ritual, there is a strange reversal. Her body is in their hands. Her appearance, her public self, is their creation. She rules their hands, the hands that pull the laces, that brush the hair, that fetch the furs. But she does not rule her own fate. The magnificent gown she is being dressed in is not just a piece of clothing, it is a uniform. It is the symbol of her role, of her duties, of the political and dynastic marriage she has been born into. She does not choose this dress any more than she has chosen her husband or her life. The servants who dress her are a constant, living reminder of her own place in the great, complex web of power and obligation. She is a lady. She is a ruler of her own small domestic world, but she is also a beautiful and valuable object, dressed and prepared each day for a role that has been written for her by others.
Meals in the Great Hall. The midday meal, or dinner, in a medieval castle is the social high point of the day. It is a time for the entire household, from the lord and lady down to the lowest stable hand, to gather in the great hall. It is a ritual of community, a display of the lord's wealth and generosity, and for the noblewoman, another public performance that requires a careful and constant adherence to the rules of etiquette. The Great Hall is the largest and most impressive room in the castle. A great fire roars in the hearth. The long, heavy trestle tables have been set up, covered with linen tablecloths. The air is filled with the noise of 100 conversations, the barking of the hunting dogs that roam the floor, and the smell of roasting meat and wood smoke. The seating is a rigid map of the castle's social hierarchy. The lord and lady, their family, and any high-ranking guests sit at the high table, a table set on a raised platform, or dais, at one end of the hall. This elevates them above the rest of the household and gives them a clear view of the entire room. The lady takes her seat. The table before her is set with a fine linen cloth, a silver salt cellar, and perhaps a personal silver cup. But there are no plates as we know them. Her food will be served on a trencher, a thick, square slice of stale bread which will soak up the juices of the meat. The meal begins with the ritual of cleanliness. Servants move along the high table carrying a silver ewer of scented water and a basin. They pour the water over the lady's hands, and she dries them on a fine linen towel.
Then the food arrives. It is brought from the kitchens in a grand procession. A great platter of roasted meat, venison or pork or swan, is presented to the high table first. The lord, or a special carver, will cut the best pieces of meat for his wife and his most honored guests. The noblewoman eats with a delicate and practiced grace. She does not have a fork, a tool that is not yet in common use. She eats with her fingers and with a small personal knife that she uses to cut her meat. The etiquette is strict. She must use only 3 fingers of her right hand to pick up her food. She must not speak with her mouth full. She must wipe her mouth on her napkin before she drinks from the shared cup of wine. Her meal is a performance of her refined aristocratic nature. She eats daintily, taking small bites, even though the cold and the long morning may have left her genuinely hungry. To eat with a ravenous appetite is considered vulgar, a sign of a peasant's manners. While she dines on the fine white bread and the tender roasted meat, the rest of the household, seated at the lower tables, eats a simpler fare. They are served the lesser cuts of meat, and their bread is the dark, heavy bread of the common folk. Their ale is weaker, their conversation louder. The meal is long, and it is noisy. The dogs fight for the scraps of bone and gristle that are thrown to the floor. A minstrel might play a tune in the corner. The lord is deep in a loud conversation with the knight seated next to him, and the lady sits, a figure of quiet, composed elegance amidst the chaos. She smiles at the guests. She engages in polite, careful conversation. She is the gracious hostess, the serene center of this boisterous masculine world. Her meal in the great hall is not just about sating her hunger. It is another duty, another public demonstration of her rank, her grace, and her perfect mastery of the complex and demanding role she was born to play.
A lady's duty of hospitality. A medieval castle is not an isolated private home. It is a center of power, a node in a vast network of political and familial alliances. And as such, it is a place of constant comings and goings. The arrival of guests, whether they are powerful neighboring lords, traveling church officials, or simply a distant cousin on a journey, is a frequent and expected event. And the management of this constant flow of visitors, the sacred duty of hospitality, falls largely on the shoulders of the noblewoman. Let us imagine the arrival of an important guest on a cold winter's afternoon. The watchman on the tower has sounded his horn, and a flurry of activity begins in the castle. The lord of the manor may be the one to formally greet the guest in the courtyard, but it is the lady, the domina, who has been preparing for this arrival for days. Her role is that of a master organizer, a general of a domestic army. She has overseen the airing of the guest chambers, ensuring that the finest furs and the best woolen blankets are on the beds. She has instructed the servants to build up the fires in the hearths, a costly but essential gesture of welcome. Her most important task is the planning of the feast. A great lord's visit requires a great display of abundance, a feast that will reflect the honor and the wealth of her husband's house. She has spent days in consultation with her steward and her cook. What game is available from the forest? What spices can be used? How many courses should be served? The feast is a complex logistical operation. The ingredients must be procured, the extra servants must be organized. The seating arrangement in the great hall must be carefully planned to reflect the precise rank and importance of every guest.
When the guests arrive, the lady stands beside her husband to welcome them. She is the image of grace and composure. Her gown is her finest, her smile is warm and welcoming. She engages in the formal, polite conversation that the occasion demands, inquiring after the guest's journey, their family, their health. During the feast itself, she is the serene and watchful center of the event. While the men are drinking heavily and talking loudly of war and politics, her role is to ensure that the feast runs smoothly. She quietly directs the servants with a glance or a subtle gesture. She ensures that every guest's cup is filled, that the entertainment is pleasing, that the conversation does not descend into a drunken argument. This duty of hospitality is one of her most important political functions. A well-managed and generous reception can cement a political alliance. A clumsy or meager one can cause a grave insult with serious consequences. The reputation of her husband and of their entire lineage rests, in part, on her ability to perform this role with a flawless grace. It is an exhausting and often thankless job. She must be a constant, smiling, and seemingly effortless presence, while her mind is filled with 1,000 small, practical details. She is a performer on a public stage, her every word and gesture subject to the critical gaze of her guests. And so, as the music plays and the wine flows and the men laugh loudly in the warm, firelit hall, our noblewoman sits, a figure of perfect, composed hospitality. She is the quiet and often invisible architect of this grand display of power. Her careful grace, the thread that holds the entire fragile fabric of the evening together.
Embroidery by candlelight. The life of a medieval noblewoman is largely a public one, lived out in the great hall, the chapel, and the formal spaces of the castle. But there are also quiet, private hours, especially during the long, dark evenings of winter. In these hours, after the main meal is done and the men are still drinking by the fire, the lady and her women retreat to a more secluded space, the solar, or even her own bedchamber. And here, in the dim, flickering light of a few precious candles, another of her essential duties unfolds, the art of embroidery. Needlework is not a hobby for a noblewoman. It is a sign of her virtue, her patience, and her refined aristocratic nature. To be skilled with a needle is as important for a lady as it is for a knight to be skilled with a sword. Let us watch her at her work. She sits on a low wooden stool, close to the fire, but still wrapped in a fur-lined robe against the chamber's persistent chill. Before her is a large wooden frame, upon which a piece of fine linen or velvet is stretched taut. The only light comes from a single beeswax candle on a stand beside her, its flame a small, wavering star in the darkness. Her work requires an intense, focused light, and she leans in close, her eyes straining to see the fine details. Her hands, which have been idle and graceful during the public rituals of the day, are now engaged in a work of incredible skill and precision. With a fine needle of bronze or iron, she stitches with colored threads of silk and gold. The silk and the gold thread are fantastically expensive, imported from the Far East along the great trade routes.
Her ability to use such materials is another subtle and constant display of her family's wealth.
She is not just sewing a simple pattern. She is creating a picture in thread. She might be working on a new set of vestments for the castle chaplain, embroidering the image of a saint or a scene from the Bible. Or she might be working on a great tapestry, a collaborative project with her ladies-in-waiting that will one day hang on the cold stone walls of the great hall, telling the story of a famous battle or a heroic ancestor. The work is incredibly slow, a painstaking process of thousands of individual tiny stitches. The rhythmic, quiet sound of the needle passing through the fabric is the only sound in the room, save for the crackle of the fire and the low, murmured conversation of her companions. For the ladies' chamber in the evening is also a place of quiet female society. Her ladies-in-waiting sit with her, their own needlework in their hands. Here, in this private, feminine space, away from the loud, boisterous world of the men, a different kind of conversation takes place. It is a world of gossip, of shared secrets, of advice on matters of the heart or of the household. The long hours of needlework are a quiet and meditative time. It is a time for the mind to wander, for the hands to be busy with a beautiful and creative task. It is a way of imposing a small, perfect and colorful order on a world that is often chaotic and gray. Each stitch is a moment, an hour, a day of her life, captured in silk and gold. The great tapestries that we now see hanging, faded and silent in our museums, are the collective diaries of these women, their stories stitched away hour by hour in the long, dark and quiet evenings of the medieval winter.
In the romantic songs of the minstrels and the troubadours, love is a powerful, all-consuming force, a matter of stolen glances, of secret meetings, of a knight's devotion to his lady. But for the medieval noblewoman, this idea of romantic love is a beautiful and often cruel fantasy. Her reality is far more pragmatic, far more political. Her marriage is not a matter of the heart, it is a matter of state, a contract, a strategic alliance between two powerful families. Her fate is often decided for her before she is even old enough to understand what it means. She is a piece on the great dynastic chessboard of the nobility. Her value is measured not in her personality or her desires, but in the lands, the titles, and the military power that she will bring to a union. Let us imagine her as a young girl, perhaps only 5 or 6 years old. She is brought into the great hall, dressed in her finest clothes. Her father, the great lord, is meeting with another powerful nobleman. There are documents of parchment on the table, a scribe with his ink and his quill. The two lords are talking, their voices low and serious. They are negotiating. They are negotiating her future. She is formally betrothed to the other lord's son, a boy she has never met. The contract is written, it is sealed with wax, and it is binding. From this moment on, her life has a new and unalterable trajectory. She will be raised with this destiny in mind. Her education is not about cultivating her own intellect or her own talents. It is about preparing her to be a suitable wife for a powerful man. She is taught to be modest, to be pious, to be obedient. She is taught the complex skills of running a great household, of managing servants, of presiding over a feast. She is being groomed for a role, for a function. When she reaches the age of marriageability, which can be as young as 12 or 14, the wedding takes place. It is a grand and public affair, a celebration, not of love,
but of the new alliance between the two families. There are feasts, there are tournaments.
She is then taken from her own home, the only world she has ever known, and she travels to the castle of her new husband. She is a stranger in a strange land, surrounded by new faces, new customs. Her husband is a man she barely knows, often many years older than she is, and she is now his property. Her primary duty to provide him with a male heir to continue his lineage. Love, in this context, is not a prerequisite for marriage. It is something that, with luck, might grow over time, a quiet affection born of shared duty and long familiarity. But just as often, it does not. The marriage might be a cold and formal partnership, or worse, a relationship of cruelty and neglect. And the romantic ideal of courtly love, the one the minstrels sing about, exists as a kind of parallel, fantasy world. A lady might have a knight who declares himself her champion, who wears her colors in a tournament, who writes her poetry. But this is a highly ritualized and almost always unconsummated game, a safe and theatrical outlet for the emotions that have no place in the hard reality of her marriage. The noblewoman, for all her wealth, her titles, and her fine gowns, is a prisoner of her own bloodline. Her life is a sacrifice to the greater good of her family, her destiny, a thread in a great political tapestry that has been woven for her by others. The love she hears about in the songs is a beautiful, distant music, played in a room she is not allowed to enter.
Bearing heirs in the cold. For the medieval noblewoman, there is one duty that supersedes all others. It is the great, central, and often terrifying purpose of her existence, to bear a son. Her entire marriage, the political alliance her family has so carefully constructed, can succeed or fail based on her ability to produce a healthy male heir to inherit her husband's lands and titles. And this profound biological and dynastic drama unfolds in a world of deep cold and of primitive and often dangerous medical understanding. Let us imagine Our Lady in the depths of winter, in the late stages of her pregnancy. Her life, which is already confined, becomes even more so. She spends her days in her sola, her private chamber, which has been made as warm and as comfortable as possible. The fire is kept blazing. The draughts are blocked with extra hangings. Her body, in its heavy, layered gowns, is a source of constant discomfort. But her greatest concern is for the child she carries within her. She knows that childbirth is the most dangerous journey a woman can undertake. The chances of dying in childbirth or from an infection afterwards are terrifyingly high. Every noble family has its stories of young wives, of mothers and sisters who were lost in the childbed. Her faith is her greatest comfort. She prays daily to the Virgin Mary, the Great Mother, and to Saint Margaret, the patron saint of childbirth. She might have a special birthing girdle, a long scroll of parchment inscribed with prayers and magical charms, which is wrapped around her belly. When the time of her labor comes, the male world is banished. The Lord, her husband, is not present. This is a woman's world, a secret and sacred space. The bedchamber is sealed off, the candles are lit. She is attended by her mother, her sisters, her most trusted ladies-in-waiting, and, most importantly, the midwife.
The midwife is an older woman, a figure of immense practical knowledge. She does not have formal medical training, but she has the wisdom of experience, of having attended hundreds of births. She knows the herbs that can ease the pain, the positions that can help the delivery. Her voice is a low, calm, and reassuring presence in the room. The labor is long, and it is agonizing. The chamber is warm, but the lady's body is racked with waves of pain and exhaustion. The women around her murmur prayers, they wipe her brow, they offer her sips of wine, and then, with a final great effort, the child is born. The first thin, wailing cry of the newborn is a sound of immense, overwhelming relief. The first question, asked in a hushed, anxious tone, is always the same. Is it a son? If the answer is yes, a wave of joy and triumph sweeps through the room. The lady has done her duty. She has secured the lineage. The bells of the castle chapel will be rung to announce the birth of an heir. If the child is a daughter, the reaction is more subdued. A daughter is a valuable asset, another future piece on the marriage chessboard, but she is not the heir. The lady knows that her duty is not yet fulfilled. She must try again. The cradle, a heavy wooden box on rockers, has been prepared. It is placed near the hearth. It is lined with the softest wool and fur. The newborn is swaddled tightly in linen bands and placed within it, a small, fragile, and incredibly precious new life, beginning its own journey in the heart of the cold stone castle.
Illness in the castle. The stone walls of a medieval castle provide a formidable defense against a besieging army, but they are a poor and porous barrier against an enemy that is far more common, more silent, and more deadly: disease. In the cold, damp, and crowded conditions of castle life, illness is a constant, lurking presence, and the winter is its most powerful and dangerous season. For the noblewoman, her life of privilege offers some, but not complete, protection. She is better fed than the peasantry, and her chambers are warmer, but she is still vulnerable to the host of ailments that haunt the medieval world. The most common complaints of the winter are the diseases of the lung, the constant chilling drafts, the thick wood smoke in the great hall, the dampness that seems to radiate from the very stones. All of this creates a perfect environment for coughs, for fevers, for what they call a catarrh or a rheum. Let us imagine Our Lady has fallen ill. She has a high fever, a deep, rattling cough, and a sharp pain in her chest. She is confined to her bed, the heavy curtains drawn to keep out the drafts. The room is quiet, the air thick with the smell of sickness. The first line of treatment comes from the women of her household. They rely on a traditional knowledge of herbal remedies: a hot drink of spiced wine, a tisane of elderflower to bring down the fever, a pungent poultice of mustard and herbs placed on her chest to ease the congestion. These are the gentle, comforting remedies of the home. But if the illness is serious, a more powerful figure is summoned: the physician. He is a man of learning, perhaps trained at a university in Italy or France. He arrives with his books, his charts, and his air of grave authority. His understanding of the body is based on the ancient Greek theory of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. He believes that illness is caused by an imbalance of these humors. His diagnosis is not based on an examination of the patient, but on an analysis of her urine, which is brought to him in a special glass flask. He holds it up to the light, studying its color, its clarity, its sediment.
His treatment is designed to restore the balance. The fever and the flushed face, he decides, are a sign of an excess of blood, a hot and wet humor. His primary prescription is immediate and, to us, horrifying. He calls for a bloodletting. A barber surgeon is summoned. He is a craftsman, not a scholar. With a small, sharp knife called a lancet, he makes an incision in a vein in the lady's arm. The dark blood is drained into a metal bowl. The physician watches carefully, judging by the color and the quantity when enough has been taken.
The procedure leaves the lady weak, pale, and even more vulnerable than before. He might also prescribe a purge or an emetic to cleanse the body of its bad humors. And he will give strict dietary instructions. She must avoid cold and wet foods and eat only those that are considered hot and dry. And then there are the leeches. These small black creatures are kept in a special jar. They are placed on the skin and they attach themselves, drinking the bad blood, their bodies swelling as they work. This is the best that the medical science of the age has to offer. It is a system of theory and of violent intervention, often doing more harm than good. The lady endures these treatments with a quiet, fatalistic resignation. Her fate, she knows, is ultimately in the hands of God. Her ladies-in-waiting pray at her bedside. The priest is called to hear her confession. In the cold, quiet, candle-lit room, the battle for her life is fought, not just by her own body, but by the competing forces of female folk wisdom, of male academic theory, and of a deep and abiding Christian faith.
Defending the household in his absence, the medieval world is a world of endemic, low-level warfare. The lord of the castle is a warrior. His primary function is to fight for his king, for his own honor, or to expand his own lands. And when he rides to war with his knights and his men-at-arms, the castle and all the people within it are left in the hands of his wife. The noblewoman, who is raised to be a figure of grace and domesticity, must, in her husband's absence, become the commander of a fortress. Let us imagine the scene. The lord and his retinue have departed, their banners disappearing over the distant, snow-covered hill. The great gate of the castle is closed and barred. The lady of the manor now stands on the battlements, the cold winter wind whipping at her veil. She looks out at the quiet, empty landscape. She is now the castellan, the guardian of her husband's legacy, of his lands, and of his people. Her role is a sudden and dramatic transformation. She is no longer just the mistress of the household. She is the master of the castle. Her days are no longer filled with embroidery and polite conversation. They are filled with the hard, practical, and often fearful business of defense. Her first task is to take an inventory of her resources. She meets with the castle steward, the reeve. How much grain is in the storehouses? How much salted meat is in the cellars? How much firewood is in the woodpile? A castle under siege is a ship at sea. It must have enough provisions to outlast the enemy. She must be a careful and prudent manager, rationing the food and the fuel to make it last for as long as possible. She must also manage the castle's defenses. She walks the walls with the captain of the small, skeleton crew of guards that has been left behind. She checks the state of the ramparts, the condition of the gatehouse mechanism. She ensures that the watches are kept diligently, day and night.
Her word is now law. The servants, the guards, the villagers who have taken refuge within the walls, they all look to her for leadership. She must be firm, she must be calm, she must project an aura of confidence, even if her own heart is filled with a cold, gnawing fear. If an enemy does appear, if a rival lord sees her husband's absence as an opportunity, her role becomes even more critical. She is the one who must direct the defense. From the top of the gatehouse, she will watch the enemy forces assemble. She will give the orders to the archers on the walls. She will be the one to refuse the enemy's demand for surrender.
The sagas and chronicles are full of stories of these formidable women, of she-wolves who held their castles for months against a determined siege, their courage and their cunning an inspiration to their small, beleaguered garrisons. This is the other side of the noblewoman's life, the side that is often forgotten in the romantic tales. She is not just a delicate flower to be protected. She is a member of a ruling military class. She has been raised in a world of violence and power, and when the time comes, she is expected to be as strong, as ruthless, and as brave as any man. As she stands on the cold, wind-swept wall, the fate of hundreds of people resting on her shoulders, she is at her most powerful and at her most alone.
Rumors of plague beyond the gate. For the noblewoman in her stone castle, the world of the peasantry below is a distant and separate reality. But there is one force that does not respect the high walls of the manor or the deep moat that surrounds it. There is one intruder that cannot be kept out by a barred gate. This is the plague. The news arrives as it always does, as a rumor, a whisper. A traveling merchant, allowed into the castle courtyard to sell his wares, brings the story. He speaks of a strange and terrible sickness in a town a few days' journey to the south. He speaks of a high fever, of black swellings, and of a death that comes with a horrifying speed. The lady listens to this news with a rising sense of a cold, familiar dread. The memory of the great pestilence of the last century is a dark legend, a story told by the old people of a time when the world was almost emptied. And the fear of its return is a constant low-level anxiety in the medieval mind. The first response is to try and seal the castle off from the world. The great gate is closed and barred, not against an army, but against an invisible microbial enemy. No travelers are allowed in. The villagers who live in the hovels outside the walls are forbidden from entering. The castle becomes an island, a fortress trying to isolate itself from a sea of contagion. The fires in the great hall are burned higher than usual. The air is filled with the smoke of aromatic woods like juniper and pine. This is not just for warmth. It is a form of fumigation. The prevailing medical theory of the time is that the plague is a miasma, a poison in the air, a bad air. It is believed that strong, pleasant smells can purify the air and ward off the disease. The lady will have her servants burn fragrant resins and herbs throughout the castle. She will carry a pomander, a small perforated ball filled with spices and perfumes, which she holds to her nose when she walks through the halls. A new and terrible significance is attached to every small sign of illness within the walls. A servant who develops a cough is immediately regarded with suspicion and fear. They might be isolated in a remote room, their food left outside their door. The lady's medical knowledge is a mixture of Christian faith and folk wisdom. She will increase her prayers, asking for God's protection. She will have the priest bless the castle's water supply, and she will rely on the herbal remedies that are believed to be effective against pestilence. A bitter, foul-tasting drink called treacle, which contains a complex mixture of herbs and spices, is a prized and expensive medicine. But all of these measures are a form of whistling in the dark. The people in the castle are not truly isolated. They are still breathing the same air. And the rats, the true carriers of the bubonic plague, do not respect the castle walls. They scurry through the storehouses, in the kitchens, in the very walls of the building. The fear of the plague is a quiet and insidious siege. It is a waiting game. Every day that passes without a case inside the walls is a small, temporary victory. The lady of the castle, in her fine, fur-lined gown, is just as vulnerable as the peasant in his hovel. The plague is the great leveler. And so, she waits.
She listens to the rumors from the world beyond the gate, to the slow, steady tolling of the village church bell that might signal another death. And she prays that the high, cold stone walls of her home will be enough to keep the angel of death from her door.
The endless winter nights. In the medieval calendar, the winter night is not just a period of darkness, it is a separate and distinct country, a realm with its own rules, its own dangers, and its own profound and often crushing silence. For the noblewoman, whose days are a structured performance of duties, the long, dark, and empty hours of the winter night can be a time of intense loneliness and of quiet, introspective dread. The day ends early. As the sun makes its low, brief journey across the winter sky, the light begins to fail in the mid-afternoon. The world outside the castle walls is given over to a deep and often starless darkness. The household retreats indoors. The great hall is lit by the roaring fire and by a few smoky torches set in iron brackets on the walls. The evening meal is eaten. The minstrel might play his songs. But as the hour grows late, a deep quiet descends upon the castle. The servants retire to their sleeping quarters. The men-at-arms, their bellies full of ale, fall into a heavy sleep in the hall. The fire is banked for the night, its great roar diminishing to a low, sullen, and pulsing glow. Our Lady retreats to her own chamber. It is a large, cold, and profoundly silent space. The only light is from a single beeswax candle, its flame a small, fragile, and lonely star in the immense darkness. The wind howls outside, a low, mournful, and constant sound, a reminder of the vast, empty wilderness that surrounds her small, fragile point of light. Sleep does not always come easily. The bed, with its heavy enclosing curtains, is a small haven, but the mind can be a restless and unruly thing. The silence of the night is not a peaceful silence. It is a silence that is filled with the small, strange sounds of the old stone building, the creak of a great roof beam settling under its own weight, the distant, scurrying sound of a rat in the walls, the rattle of a wooden shutter in a sudden gust of wind.
In this silence, the anxieties of the day can grow and magnify. She thinks of her husband, away at a distant war. Is he safe? Is he alive? She thinks of a sick child in the nursery, listening for the sound of a cough from the next room. She thinks of the complex and often dangerous politics of her world, of a rival family's ambition, of the shifting favor of the king. The night is also a time when the world of the supernatural feels very close. The stories told by the fire of ghosts, of demons, of the restless dead come to life in the dancing shadows of her chamber. The wind does not just sound like a wind, it sounds like a voice, a mournful cry. Every unexplained noise is a potential intruder, a spirit from the other world. She lies awake in the darkness, wrapped in her furs, her eyes open, simply listening and waiting. The hours of the night stretch out, a great, dark, and empty ocean of time. She counts them by the tolling of the bell from the castle chapel, the watchman's call from the battlements. The medieval night is a long and profound journey. It is a time when the structured public self of the day dissolves, and the private, vulnerable self is left alone with its thoughts, its fears, and its faith. It is a quiet and often lonely vigil, a long, cold wait for the first, gray, and blessed promise of the dawn.
The music of the minstrel. In the cold, stone, and often monotonous world of the medieval castle, beauty and entertainment are rare and precious commodities. And in the long, dark evenings of winter, There is no figure more welcome, more honored, or more essential to the spiritual warmth of the household than the minstrel. He is the carrier of news, of stories, and of the sweet transformative power of music. Let us imagine the scene in the great hall after the evening meal. The trestle tables have been cleared, the fire in the great hearth has been built up, its flames casting a warm, dancing light on the tapestries and the high, smoky rafters. The lord, his lady, their family, and the entire household are gathered on the benches, their faces turned towards the fire. A man steps into the circle of light. He is a traveling musician, a minstrel. He is not a nobleman, but he is a respected professional. His instrument might be a lute with its delicate pear-shaped body, or a small portable harp. He sits on a low stool, and a deep, expectant silence falls over the hall. He begins to play. The music is a liquid, golden thing in the cold stone space. The notes of the lute are clear and bright, a fragile, intricate melody that seems to hang in the smoky air. It is a sound of pure, uncomplicated beauty, a stark contrast to the harsh, practical sounds of the rest of the day, the clang of armor, the creak of a gate, the howl of the wind. And then he begins to sing. His voice is clear and strong. He sings the great epic poems, the chansons des gestes. He sings of the heroic deeds of Charlemagne and his paladins, of the great battles against the Saracens. He sings of noble knights, of their courage, their loyalty, the glorious deaths on the field of honor. These are the stories that reinforce the values of the warrior class, who are his primary audience.
Then the mood might change. He will sing a lie, a tale of courtly love. He sings of a beautiful, unattainable lady and the devoted and often secret love of a brave knight. He sings of stolen glances, of secret tokens, of a love that is pure and spiritual and almost always tragic. For our noblewoman, sitting beside her husband, this is a moment of profound and bittersweet escape. The world of the song, a world where a woman is adored, where love is a noble and all-consuming passion, is a world away from the reality of her own politically arranged marriage. The music allows her, for a brief time, to inhabit this fantasy, to feel the emotions that have no place in her real practical life. The minstrel is also a newspaper. He has traveled from another court, another castle. Between his songs, he shares the news, the gossip, the latest political intrigues. His performance is a vital link to the wider world, a way for the isolated castle community to feel a part of the great ongoing drama of their time. For an hour or two, the entire household is held captive by the power of his performance. The cold stone walls seem to recede. The howling of the winter wind is forgotten. The hall is filled with the warmth of a shared emotional experience. And then the final note of the lute fades into the silence. The performance is over. The minstrel is rewarded with a meal, a place by the fire, perhaps a few silver coins. The spell is broken. The silence returns, heavier and deeper than before. But the echo of the music remains, a memory of beauty, a small, fragile, and essential warmth carried in the hearts of the listeners through the long, cold night. Whispers of court intrigue. The medieval castle, for all its physical isolation, is not a world unto itself. It is a node in a vast and often invisible network of power, of ambition, and of intrigue. The fate of the noblewoman and her family is not just determined by the harvest or by the outcome of a local battle.
It is profoundly shaped by the shifting, treacherous currents of high politics, by the favor of the king, and by the constant, whispered game of alliances and betrayals that is played out at the royal court. And in the winter, when the roads are blocked and the world is quiet, the primary carrier of this dangerous information is the letter. Let us imagine a messenger arriving at the castle gate after a long and difficult journey through the snow. He is brought into the great hall, and he presents a sealed letter to the Lord. The letter is a precious and a powerful object. It is written on expensive parchment, and it is sealed with the distinctive wax seal of another great noble family, or perhaps even of the king himself. The Lord takes the letter to his private solar, his wife, the lady, at his side. She is his closest advisor, his partner in the complex business of power. The breaking of the seal is a moment of high tension.
But just as often, the news is dangerous. It might be a subtle warning from an ally at court that their family is falling out of favor. It might be a summons from the king to come to court and answer for some perceived transgression. It might be a secret proposal for a new and potentially treasonous alliance against a rival faction. The lady listens to these words, her mind racing. She understands the hidden meanings, the coded language of power. She knows that their family's entire future can hang on how her husband chooses to respond. A single, misjudged move can lead to the confiscation of their lands, to exile, or to a charge of treason and a death sentence. Her role in these moments is critical. While her husband might be a man of action, of the sword, she is often the one with a more subtle understanding of the human dynamics of the court. She has her own network of information, her own correspondence among the other noblewomen. She can offer a perspective that is calmer, more strategic, less driven by the masculine codes of honor and pride. The castle, which feels like a safe and solid fortress, suddenly feels fragile. The real wars are not always fought with armies on a battlefield. They are fought with whispers, with secrets, with the ink on a piece of parchment. The lady and her lord will spend long hours in the cold solar, the letter on the table between them, discussing their options, weighing the risks. The decision they make here, in this quiet, isolated room, can send a ripple out that will change the course of their lives. The life of a noblewoman is a life lived in a state of constant, low-level political anxiety. She is a player in a game where the rules are unwritten, where the stakes are absolute, and where a single whispered word from a distant court can be more deadly than any winter storm.
Secrets behind tapestries. The formal public spaces of a medieval castle, the great hall, the chapel, were places of rigid order and of constant observation. But behind this public facade, behind the thick stone walls and the heavy ornate tapestries, lies a hidden secret geography. This is a world of back staircases, of hidden passages, of private chambers where the true, and often secret, life of the castle unfolds. For the noblewoman, who lives her life under the constant watchful eye of her husband, her servants, and her guests, these hidden spaces are a realm of a different kind of power, a place where secrets are kept and where the official narrative of the castle can be subtly subverted. The tapestries that hang on the cold stone walls are not just for warmth and decoration. They are a curtain, concealing the rough, unfinished stone behind them. And in that space between the fabric and the stone, whispers can be exchanged, secrets can be passed. A lady and her trusted maid might stand before a great tapestry depicting a heroic battle, their heads close together, their conversation about a matter of the heart or a household intrigue completely hidden from anyone else in the hall.
And sometimes what lies behind the tapestry is more than just a cold wall. The medieval castle, with its immense thick walls, is often a honeycomb of hidden passages and secret staircases. These are not just the stuff of romantic fiction. They are a real and practical part of the castle's design. They allow for the discreet movement of servants and for a secret escape route in times of a siege. But they also serve a more intimate purpose. A secret staircase might connect the lady's bedchamber directly to the chapel, allowing her to go to her private prayers without having to pass through the public halls. Or it might lead to a small hidden balcony, a postern, from which she can observe the activities in the great hall without being seen herself.
These hidden passages are the arteries of the castle's secret life. A trusted maid might slip through a hidden door behind a tapestry, carrying a forbidden letter from her lady to a secret love, or a quiet message to a political ally. The lady's own solar, her private sitting room, is another key part of this secret geography. It is her domain, a place where men are not usually welcome without an invitation. Here, surrounded by her ladies-in-waiting, she is the center of a world of female power and influence. It is here that marriages for her children are negotiated, that information is gathered and exchanged, that the subtle but powerful work of managing the family's social and political fortunes is done. The castle is a building of two faces. There is the public face, the grand, imposing, and masculine world of the great hall and the battlements. And there is the private face, the hidden, secret, and often feminine world of the back corridors, the private chambers, and the space behind the arras. To survive and to thrive, a noblewoman must be a master of both of these worlds. She must know how to perform her public role with a flawless grace, but she must also know how to navigate the castle's secret pathways, how to guard her own secrets, and how to use the hidden currents of information and influence to protect herself and her family. The cold, silent stone of the castle hides many secrets, and the lady of the house is often the keeper of them all. The Midnight Chapel. The castle sleeps. The great hall is dark, the fire in the hearth a bed of sullen, glowing embers. The only sound is the howl of the winter wind and the distant call of the watchman on the walls. But not everyone is asleep. In the deep, cold silence of the midnight hour, a lone figure makes her way through the dark, echoing corridors. It is the noblewoman, wrapped in a heavy fur cloak, a single candle in her hand. Her destination is the chapel. The night is a time when the veil between the worlds is thin, a time for a different, more personal and more desperate kind of prayer. The morning mass is a public duty. The midnight visit to the chapel is a private solace. She pushes open the heavy wooden door, its hinges groaning in the immense silence. She steps into the chapel. The air inside is colder than ice, a deep, profound, and sacred cold that is different from the damp chill of the rest of the castle. Her breath is a thick white plume in the wavering light of her candle. The chapel is a world of deep shadows and of small, holy points of light. The great stained glass windows are black, empty voids. The only light is from her own candle and from the single, eternal flame of the sanctuary lamp that burns before the altar, a small red star that signifies the presence of God.
She does not go to the main altar. She makes her way to a small side chapel, a niche in the stone wall
that holds the statue of her patron saint, or, most often, of the Virgin Mary. She kneels. The cold of the stone floor is a sharp, immediate pain through the thick wool of her gown. She does not have a prayer book. Her prayer now is not a formal recitation of memorized Latin. It is a direct and silent conversation from the heart. She kneels alone, a small, solitary figure in the vast, cold, and silent house of God. And here, in the safety of the darkness and the silence, the carefully constructed mask of the noblewoman can fall away. She might be praying for the soul of a dead child, her grief a raw and open wound that cannot be shown in the public world of the court. She might be praying for the safety of her husband, his face a vivid image in her mind, her fear for him a cold, hard knot in her stomach. She might be praying for the strength to endure a difficult and loveless marriage, or for guidance in a dangerous political intrigue. This is a moment of profound and often painful intimacy with her God. It is here, in the deep quiet of the night, that she can be her most vulnerable, most authentic self. Her tears, if they come, are unseen by any but the silent, painted eyes of the statue before her. Her prayer is a quiet and desperate act of hope in a world that often seems to be without it. It is an attempt to find a sense of order, of meaning, of divine comfort in a life that is so often dictated by the cold, hard, and unchangeable realities of power and of duty. She remains for a time, a still, kneeling figure, the flame of her candle the only warm and living thing in the great, cold, and sleeping heart of the castle. Then, her prayers said, she rises, her knees aching, and makes her slow, silent way back to her own cold bed, carrying the small, fragile warmth of her faith back with her into the darkness.
Spring promises that never last. After the long, gray, and grinding siege of the medieval winter, the first signs of spring are a miracle. They are a promise, a whisper of a different, warmer world. For the noblewoman, confined for months within the cold, dark walls of her castle, the arrival of the thaw is a moment of profound and welcome release. It begins, as all thaws do, with the sound of dripping water. The great thick icicles that have hung from the castle eaves for months begin to weep. The sound is a quiet, persistent, and joyful music, the sound of the world's frozen heart beginning to melt. The light changes. The sun, which has been a pale, distant, and powerless thing, begins to regain its strength. It climbs higher in the sky each day. Its rays, slanting through the narrow windows of the castle, now carry a definite, if still gentle, warmth. The lady can order the heavy wooden shutters to be thrown open for a few hours in the middle of the day. The fresh air that flows in, while still cool, is a revelation. It smells not of snow and ice, but of damp, awakening earth, of the promise of new life. It flushes out the stale, smoky, and sickness-laden atmosphere of the sealed winter chambers. She can now walk in the castle's enclosed garden, the herber. The ground is a sea of mud, but here and there the first brave points of green are pushing their way through the cold soil. The snowdrops, the crocuses. These small, fragile flowers are a splash of vibrant color in a world that has been monochrome for months. They are a testament to the stubborn, irrepressible force of life. The diet changes. The monotonous winter fare of salted meat and stored root vegetables is supplemented with the first greens of the spring,
young nettles, wild garlic, the first leaves of the cabbage patch. These fresh, vibrant flavors are a shock to a palate that has been accustomed to the taste of salt and smoke.
The castle itself seems to awaken. The great communal tasks of the spring begin. The old, filthy rushes are swept from the floor of the great hall, and a fresh, sweet-smelling layer is laid down. The tapestries are taken down from the walls and beaten in the courtyard, releasing great clouds of a winter's worth of dust. There is a feeling of lightness, of a new energy. The heavy, fur-lined winter gowns are put away in the great wooden chests, and the lighter fabrics of spring are brought out. But for the noblewoman, the promise of the spring is a promise that is never fully kept. The sun may be warmer, the world may be green again, but the castle remains cold. The great stone walls have absorbed the winter's chill so deeply that they will continue to radiate a damp, cellar-like cold well into the summer months. The stone remembers the winter, long after the world outside has forgotten it. And the duties, the constraints, the fundamental realities of her life, these do not change with the seasons. The marriage she did not choose is still her marriage. The political intrigues of the court are still a constant threat. The spring brings a renewal of the natural world, but it does not bring a fundamental change to her own. The release is temporary, the freedom illusory. The stone walls of her life remain, as solid and as unyielding as the walls of the castle itself.
A noblewoman's small joys. The life of a medieval noblewoman, as we have seen, is a life of duty, of constraint, and of a constant, grinding physical discomfort. It is easy to paint a picture of unrelenting gloom, of a life lived entirely in the shadows. But this is not the whole story. For even in the most rigid and demanding of lives, there are moments of light, of beauty, and of quiet personal joy. These moments are small, they are often private, but they are the jewels that make an otherwise hard life bearable. For Our Lady, one of the greatest of these joys is her children. While her marriage may be a political contract, the love she feels for her children is a real and powerful human emotion. In a world of formal public performances, the nursery is a sanctuary of private affection. Let us imagine her in the late afternoon, her formal duties for the day complete. She goes to the nursery, a chamber that is kept as warm and as bright as possible. Here, she can shed the mask of the great lady. She can sit on the floor, her fine gown forgotten, and play with her young children. She can listen to their laughter, a sound of pure, uncomplicated happiness that echoes in the cold stone halls. She can hold them, feel the warmth of their small bodies, and for a time, she is not a political asset or a symbol of her lineage. She is simply a mother. Another source of joy is the world of beauty and of art. She is surrounded by it, in the intricate embroidery of her own gowns, in the vibrant colors of the tapestries that hang on the walls. She might have a small personal book of hours, a prayer book that is a masterpiece of the illuminator's art. In the quiet of her chamber, she can turn the vellum pages and lose herself in the delicate, jewel-like paintings of saints and flowers, a small private world of perfect, ordered beauty.
And there is the joy of the natural world. In the spring, to walk in the castle garden and to see the first roses bloom, to feel the genuine warmth of the sun on her face after the long, cold winter. These are moments of intense and deeply felt physical pleasure. She might have a pet, a small dog, a lap dog, that sleeps on her bed, its warm, loyal presence a constant, comforting companion in a life of human formality. Or she might have a falcon or a hawk. And the thrill of the hunt, of riding out into the fields and watching her birds soar and strike, is a moment of wild, exhilarating freedom. There is the joy of friendship, of the quiet, shared confidences with her most trusted ladies-in-waiting, the small circle of women who understand her world and with whom she can share her true thoughts and feelings. And there is the joy of the small, personal luxury, a piece of crystallized ginger, a rare and expensive spice from the East that she can suck on, its sweet, fiery taste, a small, private pleasure, a new gown of a particularly beautiful silk, a song from a visiting minstrel that speaks directly to her heart. These are not the grand, heroic joys of the sagas and the romances. They are the small, quiet, and often secret joys of a life that is lived largely on the inside. They're the moments that she keeps like jewels in the private coffer of her mind. They're the small, flickering candles that she lights, one by one, against the great and often overwhelming darkness of her world.
Old age in the castle. The medieval world is a world that belongs to the young and the strong. In a life of constant physical hardship, of war, of childbirth, of disease, to reach old age is a rare achievement, a testament to a strong constitution and a great deal of luck. For a noblewoman who has survived the perils of her youth and middle age, her later years are a time of profound change, a slow, quiet retreat into a world of memory, of respect, and of a cold that has finally settled deep into her bones. Our lady is now a dowager. Her husband, the great lord, is dead. Her son is now the master of the castle. Her role has shifted. She is no longer the mistress of the household, the bustling center of its domestic life. She is now the matriarch, the elder, a figure of great respect and of a quiet advisory authority. Her days are slower, her world smaller. She no longer presides over the high table in the great hall. She takes her meals in her own warm chamber, attended by a few loyal old servants. The castle, which has been her home and her prison for her entire adult life, has become a different place. It is now a landscape of memory. She walks through the cold, familiar corridors, and she sees the ghosts of her own past. In this hall, she remembers a great feast from 30 years ago. In this chamber, she remembers the birth of her first child. In this chapel, she remembers the long, dark nights of prayer for her husband at war.
The physical world becomes more challenging. Her eyesight is dimming, and the fine embroidery she once loved is now an impossible task. Her joints, a legacy of a lifetime lived in damp, cold stone, ache with a persistent, dull pain. The fires in the hearths, which once seemed so powerful, now feel weak and distant, their warmth no longer able to penetrate the deep internal chill of old age. She spends her days huddled close to the fire, a mountain of furs piled upon her lap, but the warmth never seems to truly reach her. She is the keeper of the family's history. Her grandchildren gather at her feet, and she tells them the stories of their ancestors, of the great deeds and the secret sorrows of their lineage. She is a living link to a past that is rapidly fading into legend. Her piety deepens. The world of the spirit, of the life to come, becomes more real and more pressing than the fading physical world around her. She spends more and more of her time in the chapel. Her prayers no longer for the worldly success of her family, but for the salvation of her own soul.
She is a figure of immense authority and of profound powerlessness. Her son, the new lord, will listen to her advice with respect, but the final decisions are his. She is moved from the center of the stage to a quiet seat in the wings. Her life is a slow, graceful, and often lonely process of letting go. She has fulfilled her duty. She has provided an heir. She has managed the household. She has endured. And now, in the long, quiet twilight of her life, she waits. She waits for the final, gentle summons, for the end of the long, cold journey, and for the promise of a different and an eternal warmth.
Memory in the tapestry. In the great hall of the castle, a young woman, a new lady of the manor, sits with her needlework. She is the granddaughter of the woman we have followed on this long, quiet journey. The world has changed a little. The fashions are different. The songs of the minstrels are new. But the fundamental realities of her life, the cold, the duties, the arranged marriage, are much the same. She is working on a great tapestry. It is a vast, ambitious piece of needlework that will take years to complete. It tells a story of her own family. It depicts her grandfather, a great bearded warrior on his war horse. It shows the castle as it was in his time. And it shows her grandmother, a serene and graceful figure, her hands folded, her gaze distant. This tapestry is a form of memory. It is a way of stitching the past into the present, of making the ancestors a visible and prominent part of the life of the hall. The young lady did not know her grandmother well. She was just a child when the old woman died. She remembers her as a quiet, frail figure, always wrapped in furs, always sitting by the fire. But as she works, as she pushes her needle in and out of the coarse linen backing, as she lays down the colored wool threads that will form her grandmother's face, she begins to feel a strange and deep connection to her.
She is sitting in the same chair her grandmother sat in. She is using the same kinds of needles, the same kinds of threads. She's performing the same patient and timeless female art. She looks at the image she is creating. The face in the tapestry is young. It is beautiful. It is the face of her grandmother as a bride. And the young lady, who is herself a new bride in this same castle, begins to wonder. She wonders what her grandmother was thinking all those years ago. Did she feel the same sense of loneliness, of being a stranger in this great, cold stone house? Did she feel the same fear on her wedding night? Did she ever dream of a different life? The tapestry is a silent document. It tells the official story, the story of a noble and pious lady, the perfect consort to a great lord. But the young woman, as she works, begins to sense the other story, the untold story, the story that lies between the stitches, the story of the cold mornings, the story of the endless drafty nights, the story of the terror of childbirth in a freezing chamber, the story of the quiet, secret prayers in the midnight chapel. Her own life, which she feels so intensely as her own, is not new. It is an echo. It is a repetition. She is just another thread in the great, ongoing tapestry of her family's history. The children of her own children will one day run through these same halls. They will look up at this tapestry, and they will see her face, stitched in wool, and they will wonder about her life. And so,
The memory is preserved, not in a book of history, but in the patient, silent, and deeply human work of a woman's hands. The story is stitched, thread by thread, into a fabric that will outlive them all, a quiet and beautiful testament to the endurance, the sorrows, and the small, forgotten joys of a life that was lived and lost in the cold stone heart of the castle. The cold castle endures. The centuries have passed. The world of the medieval noblewoman is gone. The great, powerful families have faded into names in a history book. The codes of chivalry and the duties of the manor are a distant, romantic memory. But the castle remains. It stands now as a ruin, its great hall open to the sky, its walls covered in ivy. It is no longer a home, or a fortress, or a prison. It is a monument to a forgotten time. We walk through its empty, silent spaces. Our footsteps echo on the same stone floors where Our Lady once walked, her long gown rustling. We stand in the great, gaping hole of the fireplace that was once the center of her world, and we can almost feel the ghost of its long-dead heat. We look up at the narrow, empty windows, and we can hear the echo of the winter wind that once whistled through them. The wind is the only resident here now. It is a quiet, mournful sound, a long, slow sigh for all the lives that were lived and lost within these walls. She is gone, the noblewoman with her fine gowns, her quiet sorrows, and her deep, enduring strength is a ghost. Her life, which felt so real, so permanent, has vanished like the breath on a cold morning. But she is also still here. She is here in the faint, ghostly traces of the paint on the chapel walls. She is here in the worn stone of the staircase her feet once climbed. She is here in the imagined scent of wood smoke and damp rushes. Her story is a quiet one. It is not the story of a great battle or a heroic quest. It is the story of endurance. It is the story of how a human being, with all her frailties and her strengths, can create a life of meaning, of dignity, and even of beauty in the heart of a world that is often cold and hard and unforgiving. Her gown, her breath, her story, they are all now just echoes in the wind. But the great, cold stones of the castle endure, and they remember. They remember the flicker of her candle in the long, dark night. They remember the sound of her children's laughter. They remember her quiet, patient, and unbreakable spirit. And as long as they stand, her story is not entirely lost. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the cold. May your rest now be warm and deep and peaceful.